Hello, I'm Katie Wilson and you're watching Context. In the midst of the Israel-Iran conflict, one of the subjects that has arisen is whether Iran has proper allies it can count on in times of need. Iran's allies like Russia and China were quick to condemn Israel's attacks on Iran, but they stopped short of offering any concrete support. Of course, Iran no longer has an ally in Syria since the ousting of the Assad regime. Lebanon's Hezbollah, once Iran's most powerful proxy, said it had no immediate plans to retaliate as the militant group has been decimated after a year and a half of war with Israel. The Houthis in Yemen offered the strongest pledge of action by supporting a statement from their armed wing threatening US naval vessels in the Red Sea in solidarity. Experts say that with resources tied up with the war in Ukraine, Russia is unlikely to come to Tehran's rescue. Russia issued condemnation but ultimately has no defense agreement with Iran. And Putin did little to stop the advance of rebels in Syria in December last year, who toppled a key Russian ally, Bashar al-Assad, from power. Joining me now to unpack all of this is political analyst Diogo Castro Silva and Deputy Director of the Top Chubashov Center, Murad Muradov. Thank you for being with us, gentlemen. Now, Diogo, I would like to start with you. What has this conflict revealed about Iran's alliances? Does Iran have any truly dependable partners, or is it all simply rhetorical?
Well, I think you can say two things. First of all, Iran is more isolated in the short term than it was. That seems obvious. And one of the reasons is somewhat the short-term military weakness of Iran. It's very hard to support a regime where a lot of people still had doubts if it would stay in power or not. Now, this is the short term. In the long term, given that the regime has resisted, and normally authoritarian regimes that have come out of revolutions have a considerable staying power, even in difficult circumstances. That is the case of Iran. Now, there is the potential to try to break that isolation. The war is in a pause. I don't think anybody is very optimistic that we are in a long-term peace. There is a pause. So we might assess the isolation or not of Iran down the road, because now there will be certainly diplomatic moves. There is interest of outside powers in the region. There is interest perhaps of doing mischief from other parties. So we are now in a new phase where whatever we thought at the beginning, which was true about the isolation, it might feel a little bit different down the road.
Murad, I would like to bring you into this. Could you tell me more about Russia, one of Iran's key allies? What about Russia and Iran's evolving relationship, especially since the war in Ukraine?
I think this 12 days war, so-called, once again emphasized that Russian-Iranian relationship is still falling short of a full-fledged alliance. Well, first of all, Russia indeed doesn't have formal commitments to provide military support to Iran in case of a war and aggression. And there are a few reasons for this. I think first of all is that despite the both countries, so let's say, as radical and Western foreign policy direction, both of them still want to keep a window of opportunity open if it is possible at some point, if to negotiate the relationship with the West, which of course will profoundly change the whole foreign policy frameworks. Let's say Russia, especially now with the Trump administration in the White House, is obviously willing to do so. And if we imagine some grand bargain in which U.S. concedes on Russian special interests, let's say for former post-Soviet countries, or maybe even Eastern Europe, then of course abandoning Iran would be quite a fair price for Russia, I would say. On the other hand, Iran, even though it is even more isolated than Moscow, it also, I mean, at least the Ayatollahs and also significant groups within the elite, so-called liberals, they have some informal links with many Western countries' elites, and I think they wouldn't like to tie themselves completely with Russia. Let's, for example, take this North-South corridor project, which has been discussed for decades as a symbol of this alleged alliance between like Tehran and Moscow, and it still isn't there. And as far as I know, there is certain kind of sabotage in both countries, which aim at kind of preventing this interdependence of growing too strong. And besides that, Russia also have strong relations with Israel. I mean, despite there being in the different geopolitical blocks, and President Putin, like on some occasions, said that Israel has a huge Russian-speaking population, which is alone makes it quite a partner for Moscow, but also, it's important for Russia to have this working ties with Tel Aviv, to promote certain interests in the Middle East. So that's why I think the potential for Iranian geopolitical.
Diego, I'd like to bring you into this. What do you make of this? Do you feel like this conflict has revealed the limits of the Moscow-Tehran relationship, given that they do stop short of a military alliance?
Well, Russia tends not to be express a lot of solidarity with its allies unless it's in its exclusive interest. What seemed clear when the way Russia saw this conflict was as a way to have some leverage in the relationship with the US in the Ukrainian war. So it tried to play the role of mediator between Trump and Iran while leaving Iran hanging out to dry, because even there was a time limit. I mean, Israel controlled the skies. How could you support Iran regime even with weapons? How do you supply them to Iran in a short period of time? So there were practical difficulties and obviously political considerations where Russia is not famous for being expressing a lot of solidarity with its allies unless it's in its exclusive interest. Now, as I said, given that President Trump initially rejected Putin trying to use the relation between Russia and Iran as a leverage for Russia to play a mediator role, let's say, and extract concessions on the Ukraine war. Now that that has been rejected, I do consider the possibility that Russia plays a much more mischievous role to create a problem that it can solve. We need to see the relation between Russia and Iran in the logic of Russia war with Ukraine. So Russia might be interested to provoke even more problems in the Middle East so that it can finally extract the leverage out of solving whatever it has helped to create in extracting concessions from the US in what regards Ukraine. This remains the goal of Russia. So I do think there is the potential of increasing perhaps in clandestine ways the nuclear program of Iran with the help of the North Koreans as a proxy of Russia. So I do think there is potential of that because the situation as it is in the Middle East is not stable. The regime that is in Iran, even if the Ayatollahs in the long term are replaced, will be even more hardliner. I don't see it going to a democratic revolution. So you will have the potential for increasing cooperation in clandestine ways with Iran.
Now, I want to turn our attention, Murad, to another one of Iran's key allies, which is China. China remains Iran's biggest oil importer under US sanctions, but it has a careful balancing act to play, doesn't it?
It does indeed. I think also when you talk about Chinese-Iranian relations, you should take into account the particularity of Iranian foreign policy per se. Because Iran, I think, is, let's say, too unflexible due to certain ideological reasons to be, let's say, a good ally to have. It's at least it's a kind of a handy partner, for let's say the countries which have a geopolitical say differences with the US or Europe, but also given the limited capacity of Iran, which was also witnessed during the war. I think China understands that making too big a bet on Tehran isn't worth the risk, because it will almost definitely entail like more confrontational relationship with Western capitals, and Beijing now is trying hard to secure, let's say, good partnership with the EU, or at least some key European countries, which are also interested, by the way, in keeping their trade flow with China going. And obviously, let's say, an alliance with Iran would be very costly for China in terms of this kind of geopolitical leverage and reputation. And what will Iran gain? Even if we assume that Iranian government is inherently unstable, and at some point the MIC, as my colleague also mentioned, the regime change, I would say, is being replaced by another elite group, another ideology. Even for example, if it's undemocratic, etc., there's no guarantee that, say, would-be Iranian government would kind of be committed to the same foreign policy course. So that's why I think, China, as well as Russia, they want to keep their options open. And they also know that, for example, Iran doesn't have a lot of variety in terms of its oil importers, just sanctions. And this is why Iran is bound, to kind of remain within the Chinese sphere of influence, and Beijing doesn't have to, to tie itself too strongly.
Now the final countries that I want to touch upon, Diogo, is the Gulf countries. What do you think they think of Iran in light of the US base in Qatar? Has it left resentment or fear in the Arab countries?
Well, the Arab countries, one needs to go back to 79 and understand how the Sunni Arab countries saw Iran as a total revolutionary power coming on a true political event that had repercussions around the whole Muslim world. There was a rebellion in Mecca. So there was a lot of events that followed the 79 revolution. I don't think we are there anymore because Iran right now doesn't have the same ideological power. The proxies of Iran were called by Israel, so that process of wreaking havoc in different Arab countries like Syria or Lebanon is diminished. However, the question of having Western countries bombing a fellow Muslim, even though Shia country, namely Israel, is not popular in the Arab streets. So the Arab countries, especially if Israel does not profit from this, from what he has done to Israel and the proxies, to put the Gaza conflict in a more sustainable path, in a more peaceful path, it continues the war in Gaza, you will have an increasingly tight line, tight walk rope that the Arab monarchy and the Arab countries have to walk because you will have on one hand the Arab street, on the other hand also of aligning, for example, with the US. So I don't see the Arab countries are concerned, they don't want instability in the region. Everybody now is waiting, what is the political evolution inside of Iran? Like I said before, I don't see
just to touch on that a bit further, Diogo, how significantly has this war weakened Iran and its leadership, would you say?
Well, it has certainly weakened. I don't think is that the weakness will be translated into an opposition on democratic revolution. I see much more the army or the new generation of leaders in the guards coming to power and having a lot more power, because don't forget that the old generation of IRGC leaders were killed by Israel. So you have a second generation now coming to power and coming to positions of national security that I believe they can be much more hardliner than the previous one. So you can have a military government in Iran, even if it stays for a while, the Ayatollahs, the religious figures as kind of a figurehead. But I don't think we are in a stable yet point in the inside of Iran. To be very honest, I don't see the potential for the democratic revolution. I see much more a coup inside of the elites as a possibility, even if it is a silent one. And there was some reports this week in some press that is taking. That is happening. So this new regime in Iran can be, it's not necessarily we are in a path to peace or in a path to an equilibrium in the Middle East, given all that has happened. And I don't see the ambitions of Iran having, for example, a nuclear power being diminished. On the other hand, I see potential that they will be even more keen to have some kind of nuclear arsenal on their hands.
Now, in response to this, Murad, Iran's supreme leader has said that the US has failed to achieve anything significant with the nuclear strikes. What do you make of that, especially in light of what Diogo has said?
Well, to be honest, I don't see a statement much more than a piece of propaganda. I think also I now understand, but his own positions and the positions of those old guard, those people who.
But there was that U.S. intelligence report, wasn't there as well?
Yeah, sorry.
There was that U.S. intelligence report which said the nuclear program may have only been set back a few months.
Well, yeah, I agree with that. So the point is that now, first of all, I mean, the capacities of Iran are much more known to Americans, to Israelis than before. Now, the Iranian air defense has been significantly weakened, which means that if, for example, intelligence traces some kind of dubious activity on behalf of Iran in alleged nuclear production, spots. So a new series of strikes will be very likely. And I think also this has been informally reported to Tehran that they better not try to recover their program. Of course, I mean, if you imagine that at some point in the future, like the Americans completely withdraw from the Middle East, let's say, from the large Eurasian in general, yeah, of course we can imagine that then there will be potential for renewal this kind of Israel-Iran competition. But I don't see it now, and I think any attempt on behalf of Tehran to do this will be suicidal. So yeah, I think Khamenei clearly understands that all the weakness of the government has been exposed. I mean the degree of infiltration, also the lack of capacity to protect themselves, protect the higher military rank from Israeli strikes, and of course it will pose many questions in Iranian society, Iranian elites, and so I think we're just kind of trying to soften up this general feeling of incompetence of elites.
Now, you touched upon that Israel-Iran rivalry. Diego, I'd like to put that to you now. If Israel does now seek to broaden the Abraham Accords, what would this mean for Iran standing across the region?
Well, Israel, I think it's very hard for Israel to broaden the Abraham Accords without reaching a peace settlement in Gaza and occupied territories and in the situation of the West Bank. So I don't think that is possible, because I don't think the Arab leaders have sufficient detachment from the Arab street to be able to do that. So in some ways, Israel has to profit from this opportunity to try to solve the question in Gaza in a political settlement way. The problem is that the incentives inside of the Israeli political system are different, because obviously Benjamin Netanyahu has seen the continuation of conflict as a way to stay in power. So the political system in Israel itself is kind of blocked on this as well. On the other point is, the Abraham Accords might be something that, well, the question of Gaza, like I said, but also the question of the Middle East needs a political settlement. The question of Iran will not be solved until there is a political settlement around the region where Iran can be somewhat integrated in the region. Now, has the US sufficiently political leadership to do so, and the consistency, because this is not something that can be done in a week, but can it take advantage of the opening of the bombings to do something on this regard? I have my doubt. I would like that to happen, but I do have my doubts. And so we are in a pause. The different parties should see this pause as a way to reach the political settlements that can help sustain it. I have doubts on the political incentives of the different parties and the state capacity to do so.
Well, that brings this edition of Context to a close. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us on the programme.
Thank you.
Now,
Thanks so much.
Only a few years ago, Iran and its allies were at the height of their power and influence. The Lebanese militant group Hezbollah was the most powerful military and political force in Lebanon. The Houthis in Yemen were a small but formidable militia. And in Syria, President Bashar al-Assad was finding his way back to the Arab fold after years of isolation. Iran itself, despite being battered by years of sanctions, was proving its value as an ally to Russia, supporting the Kremlin in its war with Ukraine. Fast forward, and it seems those allies and proxy militias are nowhere to be found. And Iran could be the most isolated it has been since the early years of the Islamic Republic. Thank you for watching Context. Until next time, bye for now.